and thank you also for giving me the opportunity to reflect on my journey into interdisciplinary work. So let me maybe start with a little bit of description of who I am. So in a certain way, you might wonder what actually qualifies me to give this talk, because I'm really a psychologist by heart and by training. So, quite some time ago, over 25 years ago, I studied psychology in Marburg in Germany, and I did my PhD in psychology in Marburg, and with a focus on work and organizational psychology or industrial and organizational psychology. Both terms are one is the British, one is the American term. And then I worked as a work and organizational psychologist at the University of Zurich. And then I became a professor of work and organizational psychology at Saarland University. So purely psychology. So you might wonder where is the computer scientist in his career? Well, there is actually one little thing that I remembered. So in psychology, in the good old days, and I'm getting that old that I can say that, we had this diploma thesis but also a pre-diploma thesis. So after after the third semester, in the fourth semester of your bachelor degree, which you would now call bachelor degree, you had to do your Vordiplomsarbeit. And we used that on all internet users at Marburg University. So have a guess how many there were at that time? So that was 1995. And I give you some feeling of the numbers. So we have around about, I guess, 20,000 students, a little bit larger than Saarland University, and probably 5,000 people working as researchers or whatever at that university. So how many email addresses were there? What do you think?
Thousands.
1,000? Someone more? 13?
30,000.
No, that would be even more. 800? 800? 1,800. So 7%, I think that was basically the full population of the people who were either studying or working there in those times. They had an email address. Can you imagine that? Everyone else was just not familiar with that technology. I mean, yeah, and you had to use Gopher and IRC, but I think that's, just for the old people like me who still know those kind of things where you had to, there was no mouse and you had to move the cursor to navigate internet pages. Strange times. Anyway, so that was a little bit of a thing, and I actually looked at these old pieces of mine, and it's quite funny to do that. But anyway, so it's a long journey, and as I said, I was trained as a psychologist, and now the situation is really different. So this is an overview over the project I have been involved with computer scientists. So these are all interdisciplinary projects with psychology and computer science in there. It all started with big data and psychological assessment, which was a kind of a last move of colleagues who thought they needed German in their team. And then they called me and said, we just have 3 weeks, but you want to join? And I said, why not? So I ended up in big data and psychological assessment. Other projects are with the DFKI, the German Center for Artificial Intelligence here on campus, MPART and EMMA. These are projects that were funded by the federal government of Germany. We also have some research projects in the cybersecurity area. So ReCypher is one with the CISPAR and others, international projects funded by the European Union. CySec for Psych is also a European Union funded cybersecurity psychology project. Explainable intelligent system is maybe something here. I think it's the most famous interdisciplinary research collaboration on campus so far. It's computer science, psychology, law, and philosophy, and it has been very successful. I think I moved out a little bit of it, but I was there in the beginning. And then there's also Ophthalmo AI, which is, as you can guess from the name, more medicine-oriented. So that's another project funded by the federal government. And also have the logo of the CHI conference there, just to make sure that you really believe, this is someone who has at least some idea of how computer science works. So the CHI conference, for those who are not familiar, is the conference for computer and human interaction folks. And I was really glad that they invited me to review. I think that's one sign that, you know, they at least know you're there. So I think things have really changed from where I started. As I said, I was really trained as a psychologist, and apart from my pre-diploma thesis, there was not much technology involved in my studies. So you might wonder how all this happened, and then you might also know in this region, it really depends who you know. So I'm not from the region, but for those who are, you know, use ich kenne einer, der kennt, which is Saarlandish for saying I know someone who knows someone, and in this case it's Patrick Geppert, who works at the DFKI here on campus in the Effective Computer Group. And for a lot of standards, at least in the region, it's a very close colleague because he is the husband of the sister of my wife's former flatmate. So kind of a direct connection. And I'm not really sure, I can't really remember, I forgot to ask him how that really happened, but I remember the flatmate saying, you know, I have this, and then this, then he was there in the room as well, and we got to know each other, and we've been working together for quite some time. So sometimes it really depends on occasion and on meeting the right people, and I think he was really the change agent in my career, opening my eyes to the computer science area, and that's why we have, I think, now so many projects together with computer scientists. So what I like to talk about, and what I really enjoyed also reflecting for this talk, is the pitfalls, challenges, and benefits. So there are the difficult things and the more enjoyable thing. And one thing you probably already know when you ever have tried to work with someone who's not part of your discipline, that you know you use the same expressions, but you mean different things, and that's a crucial thing. So, for example, psychologists like Malte and I, you know, talk a lot about reliability, and what we mean is something that has to do with a measure, and that measure needs to be reliable in the sense that we talk about consistency. So in computer science, my impression, without being a computer scientist, it's more about the robustness of models, and robustness is something that is kind of this, you know, something similar, but it's certainly not a term we would ever use in psychology. You know, I've never heard anyone say, this is really a robust measure. Yeah, have you? No, that's not how we talk about things, but probably we mean something fairly similar. And then cross-validation could be another example. So in psychology, we typically mean that we cross-validate a measure in a new context, while as far as I know, in computer science, it's more about partitioning data into subsets. So that is something similar in a way that you could say the new subset is a new context, but for psychologists, that's not enough. So whenever I hear cross-validation, and I know that you have these, who's a computer scientist, by the way? Okay, great. So I know if you in that corner say, you know, we talk about k-fold cross-validation, and you have this, you know, these fancy ways of testing your data. For me, that's never cross-validation, because it just means partitioning the same data set into different sets. Yeah, I get that. I know the benefits. I see that. But for me, as a psychologist, I would say you always need to test this at a different, in a different context with new data. And that's not what is meant by k-fold cross-validation, as far as I understand. So you have these challenges of using the same words, but also sometimes you have different expressions for the same thing, like robustness could be a different way of saying reliability. And you have to learn how the others are actually using these terms. A second pitfall that you might already also been aware of is that we have different reward systems, and that is a huge issue, because for example, if you work with computer scientists, they will talk about these conferences, so like the CHI conference. That's why I mentioned it. In psychology, you would never mention that I was reviewing for a conference. Yeah, sure. Who cares? That is nothing special. Yeah, they were just looking for someone, and you were, not quick enough to say no. But in the computer science world, it's a privilege, and it's also very important to publish there, and that is really an issue that we also have, for example, with the CISPA, because the CISPA is very clear. They say we don't care at all about journals, and that means for people working in my group, working with computer scientists, they either have to say, okay, I'm accepting their standards, and I also try to publish at the conferences, or I'll try to, cater a little bit at least to the psychology people who always want to have journal articles. And that's a dilemma. And it's a real dilemma if reviewers just, for example, look for my publication record in this famous database that the computer science people you all know, the DPLP. I think it's in here or even connected to the region here. So if you just look up people there, and I know reviewers have done that in interdisciplinary work and then complaining, oh, he has not published that much. True, because it's just not in the database, of course, because this is a computer science database, and my colleagues' psychology papers are not in there. And it's not just about conferences in journal, it's also about, there's also a reason, and I understand that why conferences are so important for the computer science people, because at least as far as I understood, it matters for you to be the first. For psychologists, it's not that important. It's more important to do it the right way. It has to be a good design, cleverly designed, good measures, that has to be sophisticated. And quick and dirty is never gonna, bring you much, praise. But while if you're the first one who showed, you can use this fancy new method on this topic, and wow, you're the first one, you get into the conferences and you get praised for that, even if it's quick and dirty. And there were just 12 people from your lab that participated. That's not an issue for the computer science, because you were the first with the idea. For us, psychologists, is less important. Then another pitfall that I can't stress more, not enough, I think, is the idea that because I think my research important and that I see others could be interested as well, you should be interested as well. And that's a pitfall or a reaction I think that is very, very common. I know, of course, that there are many things that border to my field, because my field, you could say, is always about using psychology for work-related questions. So that's pretty broad in a way. But that's not the same. It does not mean that I'm automatically interested. And the pitfall, I think, is here that sometimes people realize that and then try to sell their topic even more. But that's not the right approach. So if you have, if you want to take away one message, just one message from this talk, I think, listening is the more crucial thing. It's not about selling your topic to the others. It's more trying to understand what is actually the things that really is of interest, motivates them, and what are also the reward system, as I just mentioned before. But really, the listening part, I think, is the crucial part. And the fourth pitfall that we, I think, all experienced here at this university is that it can't be enforced top down. So that's why I started with Patrick Gebhardt and my close connection to him, because I think that's how it all started. Because I thought Patrick is just a nice guy, and he made me interested in doing it, not because anyone was really forcing me to. And if you want to try that, it's not gonna work. I know it's very famous now, and I know you can, get sometimes money from funding agencies. But in the end, it really matters whether you get along with your colleagues and whether you really want to spend that time, because you need to spend time, as I just mentioned, for understanding their language, their terms, and also their reward system, and also what interests them, what motivates them. And you just do that with people you like. It's as easy. So I think that's at least my view as a psychologist. And my impression was also that was actually one problem with the Excellence Initiative here at Saarland University, that it was more seen as a top-down thing and less built on already existing collaboration, and that's why it's maybe also a chance now that there is, because unfortunately we didn't get the excellence initiative for the computer science field. Maybe it also opens up more opportunities, and I'm glad that we have, for example, this colloquium where we bring people together. And as I said, I think that's really crucial, that you bring people together, understand the other, and then you like to work with them. And then maybe it's going to work. All right, so let's move on to the challenges. I think one of the things we all have to be aware of is that we are trained by different disciplines. That also means we have different working habits. So one thing I really noticed, and I'm regularly struggling with, is that there's something what in time management research was actually one area that the area where I did my PhD in, it's called deadline rush. So whenever there's a deadline, you have a lot of activities going on just before the deadline. That's a pretty normal thing, but I think it's definitely more pronounced in the computer science world. So whenever you see long lines on, you can be sure there's a computer science conference deadline coming soon, and then they're all working there. And that is sometimes understandable, but it is sometimes also a critical thing, especially if you're working in a project and the people are keen on reaching the project, then the prototype works until till the deadline. But that's for psychologists typically just the starting point, because we need the prototype to do our research. So you might be happy as a computer scientist. So I've reached the deadline, and for us, it's like, okay, yeah, finally we have the project, the program, now we can do it. And that is really an issue. And then another thing, I know that is also a preference. I know all computer science love LaTeX. I don't really know why, but I know because I think it's old-fashioned. But I know you love it. And it doesn't matter that we have actually research in psychology showing that it slows down I think it's just too complicated for non-computer science. If you're not interested in the mathematical things, then you just don't need it, and the Word will be fine, if you ask me. But I know that's revolutionary for computer scientists. And I know that LaTeX has nice features once you're really into it, and and you can do these lovely things on overleaf. I know all these kind of things, but it's still, if you ask me, it's complicated. All right. Then another thing is formalization. I think that is actually an interesting part, because although some people, they start to study psychology and think it's a lot about math, which is actually not the case, because in a lot of cases, our theories are not in a mathematical way. So for psychologists, it's often a pain, or even an unnecessary pain. If you have all these formula, you can certainly make sure that students were going to leave the room because they think, it's too many math, and I don't want to do this. And I know your attitude, at least for the computer scientists in the room, it's really different. And I also understood, and that's something actually I learned from Patrick, and that it's sometimes really indispensable. You need it, because if you want to, in his case, it's about avatars. You want to make sure that they, act in a certain way. Then you need a mathematical model behind that. It's not going to work without it. You can't say, yeah, you have to smile every now and then. That's nothing you can tell a computer. It has to be some way you formalize. And that is actually interesting, because it also challenges us to be sometimes more mathematically oriented, although it's rare, because, as I said, psychologists often don't want to do that. All right, so this about the challenges. Let me now move to the benefits. So one thing is, I guess you all know this guy, Geoffrey Hinton. He just got this Nobel Prize in physics, but you may not know, he is actually, in a certain way, a psychologist. He is the godfather of artificial intelligence, and he started with a bachelor degree in experimental psychology. And you can't get a psychology Nobel Prize because there's no Nobel Prize for psychology and not for computer science and political science either. So you have to do it elsewhere, but you can start at least with a psychology degree if you want to be very, very, very successful. So that I think was only possible because he was interested in neural networks. And that's really something I did not learn from the computer science, but in my psychology degree. So in year three of, so that was 1996, I had a professor teaching me neural networks because that was really a hot thing in psychology back then. And it later on was picked up in the computer science world. And I also think there is some research in a field which is called scientometrics. You might not heard of it. It's kind of the research on research or science on science, you could also say. And they try to measure whether what makes people or papers successful or what are new funding, what the effects of new funding schemes. These kind of things are interest of for those who call themselves scientometricians. And they sometimes also do research on interdisciplinary research. And I just hope this title, prominent but less productive, is the future for everyone who is interested in interdisciplinary research. At least that's the result of this study also. The effects weren't that strong, but they were there, and let's hope they're true. I think it makes sense that you're less productive because it takes more time and you might not be able to send so many papers to whatever conference you want to send it to or journals. But maybe those who are then written by you and your colleagues from other fields have more influence. I think that's the message we can get from scientometrics. We also did a little bit of scientometric analysis in the past in my lab, and one was on cybersecurity and psychology. And so I think that's worth mentioning here because there's really a lot of room for improvement. So we only found in the whole computer science, cybersecurity world, which is, as you know, probably, a pretty large field, not just because of this, but in the World Wide Web, there are so many people doing research on that. So if you look at the conferences and journals, so if we looked at both and you look for a psychologist, you only find 4 who have published more than 2. One we thought maybe just an accident. So there are some more, of course, who are involved as authors for one publication, but there are only 4 psychologists in the cybersecurity room. So so there is certainly a lot of things you can do if you want to do interdisciplinary research, at least in that field. Another benefit is, I think, what I would try to say is toolkit enlargement. I think what we, like Malte and me, have to offer is how to run better empirical studies, at least certain kind of empirical studies. I know that, of course, our political science colleagues also have high expertise, but their focus is typically on different kind of data. So the thing that most people probably would associate with psychologists is experiments, but I just want to stress that we can do more than that. So we can do more than experiments. We can also run correlational studies. We can run meta-analyses. We can run experience sampling method and so on. So there's a whole and pretty large toolkit psychologists typically have and have experience with. So in case you're interested in working with a psychologist, I guess that's one of the huge benefits that we have to offer. But I think also computer science have a lot to offer for us. I mean, it's, the hype of the day, machine learning approaches are certain things that a typical psychologist like me might have rough understanding, and that's about it. So, but running it, no way we can do this. So we need your help. And one other thing that goes beyond these kind of things, what would be of interest actually for me at the moment, would be how to use chatbots for reaching difficult to reach populations, because this kind of interface is, at least in some countries where we do research, including Pakistan, it seems to be a worthwhile approach and easier than sending some kind of online address to people who probably don't even have an email address. Okay, that's benefit number 2. And benefit number 3 is funding. Of course, that is something we should never forget. We need money for our research, but there is often, explicit research lines for interdisciplinary research, especially from the BMBF, the Federal Ministry of Education and Research. Although, given the political situation at the moment, I think we have now a new minister, if I'm not mistaken. Well, who knows what's going to happen there and whether they have funding for the next year. So we have a complicated situation. But in general, whatever the new government going to be, and I'm sure there will be a new Federal Ministry of Education and Research, I'm sure they will have lines that are explicitly open for interdisciplinary research. So there's also money for the things that we can do. And I think we can actually do more than what psychologists typically do. So it's just this kind of ethical, legal, social implication research. What does this mean? Whatever this is, this kind of intervention or new tool or whatever for those who work with that. But in general, I think it's good that we have certain funding lines just for those who are interested in this kind of work. And last but not least, I think it's really fun. And I think one of the reasons I really I want to continue with that because I think at least the computer science I work in, they have a good attitude that fits with mine. It's often pretty down to earth, but also very research focused, and that is just very enjoyable. So I really have to say a big thank you to all the ones who made me more familiar with the world of computer science. One I've already mentioned, Patrick Gebhardt, but also Kevin Baum, who is also in this ICE project, the Explainable Intelligence System project. He's working at the DFKE at the moment. Then friends from CISPA, from other universities, in particular in Holland and in Pakistan, and all the others who I have not mentioned by name, but also have been very important. So I think roundabout that's it. What I wanted to say, I had 30 minutes, so roughly in time, and I'm really curious to hear more about your experiences and your feedback. Thank you for listening.